A Year on the Punjab Frontier, 1848–49, by Herbert Benjamin Edwardes. An expository essay on Chapter VIII, Esakhel. Here, I want to share a little-known chapter of this region's history, a time before the Isaakhel Lohani Pashtuns had likely crossed the Indus to settle in the Mianwali area. The Esakhel tribe is ranked among the famed Lohani Pashtuns, which in my opinion include the Marwat, Mianwali, Daulatkhel, Ostrana, Babar and Kethran. This expository audio essay is based on the audio version of the book A Year on the Punjab Frontier, 1848–49 by Herbert Benjamin Edwardes. I am producing this audiobook because this particular chapter on Isaakhel offers a rare first-hand account of the region at a pivotal moment just as British colonial rule was gradually replacing the Sikh administration that had held sway for a few decades. Edwards' narrative captures the tribal landscape, local dynamics, and the transitional atmosphere of that era, which is largely forgotten today. Since the mid-19th century, profound change has overtaken the Isaakhel Pashtuns. They have forgotten Pashto and now speak Saraiki, though perhaps a few families along the Indus still retain the old tongue. In the spring of 1848, as the Sikh Empire crumbled and the British East India Company prepared to absorb its remains, Herbert Benjamin Edwardes rode through the small frontier territory of Esakhel. His account, preserved as Chapter VIII of A Year on the Punjab Frontier, captures a world in terminal crisis, a fertile valley on the Indus whose chiefs had been reduced to houseless exiles while Sikh officials pocketed their incomes, a people whose simplicity and equality had been shattered by the revolving door of conquest and reconquest, and a political order so precarious that a chief's fortunes could turn on the whim of a Lahore courtier or the fall of a palace gate. Edwards' narrative is at once a personal memoir, a colonial administrative report, and a drama of imperial consolidation. From a present-day perspective, it reveals not only the texture of life on the Sikh frontier, but also the ideological framework through which British officers like Edwardes understood and justified their own expanding role in the region. The geography of a borderland Edwardes opens with a striking observation. The Indus River, which had traditionally separated Esakhel from the Punjab, had been gradually taking a more westernly course, transferring 12 miles of land from Afghanistan to the Sindh Sagar Doab. The alluvial tract of Kuchi, thrown up on the eastern bank, had become a contested zone where the men of Kuchi claimed the new land as theirs, while the Esakhailis insisted on a boundary laid down by their former chief, Ahmad Khan. Edwards' resolution of this dispute, fining the Sikh official Ram Singh 50 rupees for thinking when he ought to have obeyed, reveals the new calculus of power. The British resident had become the arbiter of frontiers, a role that would soon be formalised with annexation. This geographical fluidity mirrored the political instability of the region. The Indus, as Edwards notes, was a Hudi Secunda, or Alexandrian boundary in the eyes of the locals, a river that divided lands as it thought proper and gave them to whom it chose. The poetic invocation of Alexander the Great, the archetypal conqueror, was not lost on Edwardes. But his dismissal of the plea as too poetical for our purpose, which was eminently practical, encapsulated the British approach. Romanticism gave way to administration, and fluid boundaries were fixed by British fiat. The people and their chiefs. Edwards' ethnographic observations are both acute and ideologically charged. He describes the Esakhailis as more swarthy than we expected to see men of their nation, and looked more like Indians than Persians, a racial classification that placed them ambiguously between the martial races of the northwest and the subject peoples of the plains. He notes their long and thick hair, their beards, the loose folds of their turbans, and a certain independent and manly air that marked them for Afghans. Yet these markers of independence were, in Edwards's account, belied by a society in decay. The chief's family papers, which Edwards reproduces, tell a story of gradual dispossession. Dulal Khan received a grant from Ahmad Shah in the mid-18th century, securing half the revenue of Esakhel as a reward for past services. His descendants, however, saw their privileges progressively eroded, from half to 1/4 under the Nawab of Dera Ismail Khan, then to 1/8 under the Sikhs, and finally to nothing at all as successive governors confiscated the family estate. The turbulent and warlike Afghans of Elphinstone's account had become, in Edwards's telling, a people whose propensity to plunder has been curbed by regular government and Sikh fines, a transformation that simultaneously justified British intervention and erased the agency of the Esakhaylis themselves, the Sikh system, and its collapse. The heart of Edwards's chapter is his indictment of Sikh rule. The narrative is a litany of broken promises, arbitrary confiscations, and cynical betrayals. Dewan Laki Mull, the governor of Dera Ismail Khan, looked about in every corner, not to see what he could remit, but what more he could impose. He confiscated the income of Muhammad Khan, the Esakhel chief, on the flimsiest pretext of rebellion. When now Nihal Singh, the Sikh heir apparent, intervened to restore the chief, Laki Mull simply waited for the prince to leave and resumed his depredations. The revolving door of Lahore politics, assassinations, coups and counter-coups, only deepened the chaos. The chief of Esakhel became an exile in Banu with the regularity of a clock, while Dowlat Ray, with equal punctuality, possessed himself of the family estate. Edwards's account is corroborated by the broader historical record. The Second Anglo-Sikh War, 1848–49, erupted precisely because of this instability. The murder of British officers at Multan, the defection of Sikh troops, and the collapse of the Lahore Durbar's authority. Edwards himself would play a pivotal role in the conflict, marching a force to Multan on his own responsibility and winning victories against Diwan Mulraj. His chapter on Esakhel is therefore not merely a description but a justification. The Sikh system had failed, and British intervention was the only remedy. The British as arbiters and enforcers. Edwards presents himself as a restrained and impartial arbiter, compelled by the judgment and conscience of Sir Henry Lawrence to remove the rapacious Dewan Dowlat Rai and restore the old chief to his rights. The British, in this telling, are not conquerors, but restorers of justice. Yet the context belies this self-image. Edwards was already a British agent at the Lahore court, wielding authority over both the countries Cis and Trans of the Indus. His revenue settlement of Esakhel, compiled with very great labour, was a blueprint for future British rule. The standing orders he issued to the new commandant of Laki Fort, the commission of boundaries he proposed for the Paizu Pass, the perpetual settlement he negotiated with the Marwat chiefs, these were the instruments of imperial consolidation, not the gestures of a neutral mediator. The transformation of Esakhel under British rule would be profound. As the National Army Museum notes, the annexation of the Punjab in 1849 brought the British into direct contact with the Pathan tribes for the first time, creating a frontier zone that would remain contested for nearly a century. The tribal area beyond British control became known as Yagistan, or the Land of Rebels, while the administered districts were subject to the rigours of British law and revenue. Edwards and his contemporaries, John Nicholson, Peter Lumsden, Frederick Mackeson, were the precursors of the new imperial law, men who continued their work under the direction of the newly established Punjab Commission. The revenue and its meaning. Edwards's detailed revenue figures for Esakhel, the land tax, the cesses, the garden tax, the house tax, the gold washing tax, are a monument to the bureaucratic rationality that the British brought to the frontier. Yet they also reveal the sheer weight of extraction under Sikh rule. The total revenue of Esakhel, he calculates, was between 60,000 and 63,000 rupees annually. The chief's 1/8 share, after all deductions, was only 7,973 rupees, but his other hereditary privileges, on account of opening canals, etc., made up his income to between 18 and 20,000 rupees a year. This was a society where the ruling elite was systematically squeezed, where the grinding exactions of rulers left them barely the means of subsistence, and where there was scarcely a field in it which had not 2 claimants and 1 lawsuit. The gold washing tax, levied on a few industrious men who separated from the muddy tide of the Indus the small particles of gold, is a poignant detail. The Indus, which had transferred land from one bank to another, also yielded its mineral wealth to the labour of the poor. The naphtha that oozed from a hill in Esakhel, used only as a cure for sores on the backs of their camels, speaks to a pre-industrial economy that the British would soon transform. And the infidels' fort in the Kisara Hills, with its reservoirs cut in the rock in successive stages, was a relic of a past that Edwardes could not quite explain, a reminder that the frontier had deep histories that colonial accounts could only glimpse. The spectre of the infidel. The episode of Shah Wali Khan, the Niazi chief murdered by Sikh soldiers at the infidels' fort, is one of the most striking passages in the chapter. Shah Wali Khan, a chief of considerable character, had done the Sikhs great service, but Raja Suchait Singh either wanted him no longer or else suspected him. The murder, carried out while the Afghan knelt down to pray, was a calculated atrocity, followed by a cynical performance of grief. The Raja listened with tears in his eyes, then sent for the lifeless corpse and buried it with the utmost honour. Edwards's telling of this story is both moral outrage and political commentary. The Sikhs, in his account, are treacherous and faithless, their reckless and violent acts against the Muhammadans worthy of just execration. Yet the same could have been said, and was said, about the British. The murder of Shah Wali Khan is a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of power unconstrained by law. The British, Edwardes implies, would not make the same mistake, but the annexation of the Punjab and the brutal pacification of the frontier tribes that followed suggests otherwise. Conclusion. Edwards's chapter on Esakhel is a text of empire, written in the moment when the British East India Company was transforming the Punjab from a protectorate into a province. It is a document of extraordinary value, a first-hand account of the Sikh system in its death throes, a detailed survey of the economy and society of a frontier district, and a portrait of the Afghan tribes on the eve of British rule. Yet it is also a work of justification, in which Edwardes presents himself as the restorer of justice, the enemy of oppression, and the champion of order against chaos. From a present-day perspective, what is most striking is the continuity of the frontier problem. The tribes that Edwardes described, the Esakhailis, the Kutuks, the Viziris, remain distinct ethnic and political communities in modern Pakistan. The border between the settled and tribal areas, established in 1901, persists in the administrative structure of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The question of Yagistan, the land of rebels, continues to shape Pakistani politics as the state struggles to assert authority over the mountainous borderlands. Edwards's chapter is therefore not merely a historical document but a genealogy of the present, a window into the making of the frontier that still haunts the region today.